We are back in New Delhi at the Budh International Circuit. Now, whenever we are here to drive a car or even to spectate, this place is buzzing with sounds of high-performance machine revving all the way to their max power. This time around, all that is happening but without the oral drama. And the reason for that is this. Say hello to the Hyundai Kona Electric. Yes, this is the same car that we drove a month ago in Korea, so you already probably know what it looks like. It is the car that gave the Venue its design direction, but has a more sophisticated stance and sportier colors. The face has an Iron Man vibe to it, more so when it's lit up. Going forward, we'll have to get used to designs like these. And no, I'm not referring to this headlamp in the bumper configuration. Yes, it is getting very common, but what I'm talking about is the absence of a conventional grille or even the absence of exhaust pipes, because electric cars don't need them. In fact, electric cars may not even need this conventional body style, may not even need the conventional form that we know of in a car. But car makers and car designers might want to stick to this form to safeguard the emotional connect that we have with it. The nose has a carved pattern on it which prevents the front end from looking drab. It also hides away the charging socket, and the charger locks itself in the port with the car's central locking system. In terms of dimensions, the Kona measures about 4.2 meters in length and sits on a wheelbase of 2600 millimeters. Which size is it between the Venue and the Creta? It certainly isn't as tall though, and its sharp nose and sloping glass house make it look more like a jacked-up hatchback than a beefy SUV. So comparing the cabin size, I think this is very comparable to the Creta. The Creta certainly will have a roomier cabin is what I believe. We don't have the measurements yet. So if you need a cabin that's roomier than that of the Creta, or if you need that commanding view of the road, you might be better off with the Tucson, even though the Kona Electric is the new flagship for Hyundai India. I compared this cabin to something like the Creta again in terms of its usable space, the kind of knee room or headroom that it offers. It doesn't feel inadequate, it doesn't feel too cramped anywhere. It feels nice and roomy despite all the dark colors that have been used in here. The fit and finish, that feels quite premium. It feels the price. Everything is very nicely put together, very difficult to find faults in here. The panel gaps aren't inconsistent, everything is very nicely put together. The design, however, may be a little too simplistic for your liking. It doesn't look as futuristic as the car itself. It's quite functional though. Everything falls easily at hand, whether it is the gear selection or the drive mode selection, whether it is the controls for the seat ventilation or the drive modes. Everything is very easy and very intuitive in that sense. The air conditioning, again, falls easily at hand. You have a driver's only air conditioning function as well, which means that the air conditioning only on the driver's side will work. That is one of the many measures that this car takes to maximize its efficiency, to maximize its range, and that's something that we'll see going forward. This kind of efficiency and this kind of thought process being put into electric vehicles is something that is quite common. The infotainment hardware is quite comparable, quite similar to some of the other Hyundai vehicles, but this misses out on the blue link that you otherwise get even on a car or an entry-level SUV like the Venue now, and it will come to other Hyundai vehicles as well. Why this particular car misses out on the blue link is because, well, the cost. They had to keep the cost low, but other functions are all there, all the basics that you expect. Apple CarPlay, other smartphone integrations, all the menus that you expect are right there, and a few more because this is an electric vehicle. It's a very easy to use, very intuitive touchscreen infotainment system. It sticks out, falls in line with the instrumentation, so you don't really have to take your eyes off the road. As far as the instrumentation goes, again, a very nicely laid out instrumentation, very easy to read, nothing too complex in here. You have one big clock right in the center, which is a speedometer, but its skin or its layout changes every time you change the driving mode. And all the information, like I said, is very easy to read, very easy to access. So in terms of its overall package, or in terms of the features that are laid out, and in terms of everything is right here, it feels very normal. So if you are interested in knowing whether it feels very different, whether it is difficult to reach, are there too many menus? No, it's just like a normal car, and that is a good thing. The lack of a conventional drivetrain frees up enough space in the tunnel console for a double-decker storage arrangement. Storage spaces are aplenty in the Kona's cabin. The leather upholstery on the seats feels quite premium, and the driver's seat is electronically adjustable, while the steering is adjustable for reach and recline. The front seats are a snug fit and have firm bolstering, which should be comforting on long distances. In terms of the rear seat space, like I said, it is comparable to the Creta in terms of the usable space. The knee room, this is the kind of knee room that I get. Now, I'm not saying that it's very generous, but then again, this seat is not set to my driving preference. It's retracted completely back, and still there is a bit of knee room. With my driving preference, it's much roomier in here. What I do not like, however, is the floorboard, because of the battery pack underneath, is slightly on the higher side, and that is why you sometimes need to sit in a knees up position. But otherwise, visibility outside of the window is quite good. Headroom is quite nice. It feels nice and roomy, doesn't feel too cramped. But this again doesn't feel like an SUV. You're sitting still lower. It feels like a slightly jacked up hatchback, something like maybe a Venue or a little taller than an i20 Active. But apart from that, I think it's a nice place to be in. I even like the contouring of the seats. If you especially take a look at the seat back, it's very nicely contoured. It's not too flat and not too bolstered either. You nicely fall into a comfortable space. You have a center armrest as well. There's no rear air conditioning here. There are no rear USB ports here either. But overall space is actually quite good. The seats can be dropped to maximize boot space. There is a generous amount of boot space. So even if you want to take this car road tripping with its drive range, if you were to plan nicely, you will have enough space in there for a weekend's worth of luggage. So overall, my impressions about this cabin, it's a nice functional cabin that's not too cramped, that's not too in your face. It is roomy, it is airy, and it's a nice place to be in. The boot also packs in a carrier for the Kona's charging cable, which we will come to in a bit. So as we've told you before, there are two battery options that you get with the Hyundai Kona Electric. There's a 64 kilowatt hour battery pack and there is a 39 kilowatt hour battery pack. The latter is what we get for the Indian market. That's going to be the only option. There are no trim levels, there are no other variants, there are no other options that you get for the Kona Electric. Now, it's not really down on power or torque in terms of its real world usage. It is mainly to do with the range. This big difference between these two options is essentially the range. Now, for this particular 39 kilowatt hour pack, Hyundai elsewhere around the globe claims about 260 kilometers range, but in India, the ARAI has certified this car to go 452 kilometers, which I'm not very sure of. I think the real world figures for this car will be in the range of about 220 to 320 kilometers, which, if you think about it, is quite a long range, because if you are buying this car as something that you will use in the city and only use it over the weekends to go out on your road trips or highway runs, about 250 kilometers is a very decent range for a car of this class. That essentially means that if your commutes are less than 20-30 kilometers, you probably do not need to charge the car at all through the week, through your work days, and it's only for your weekends that you need to basically charge the car. After 3 moderately paced laps of the BIC, which amounts to a little over 15 kilometers, the Kona's indicated range only dropped by about 18 kilometers on our test car, which hints that efficiency could indeed be quite good. Speaking of charging, there are 3 charging options that the Hyundai Kona gets. There is, of course, compatibility with a DC fast charger, and that will charge up to 80% of the battery in 57 minutes. But this is, of course, a very expensive charger. If you have to buy it, it would cost somewhere in the range of 12 to 14 lakh rupees. So that's not something that is expected of you. This is something that essentially will be integrated at various places like fuel stations, malls, office spaces, other strategic locations, big parking spots. And that is something that we always refer to when we say that the lack of infrastructure, right, with electric vehicles. So essentially you need these charging points. Now Hyundai will obviously tie up with different malls or maybe different outfits to be able to integrate these charging points elsewhere around the cities. But it's not only the manufacturers look out, it's also something that the government will set up. There'll be a lot of privatization in this space as well. So going forward, yes, there will be a lot of these electric chargers. It's not a specific ecosystem. This is something going forward you will see a lot happening, at least in the metros, and that is essentially the market that this car is targeting. Now that's the DC fast charger. The other 2 options, there is an AC charger as well, which Hyundai is offering with the car, which is a big deal because essentially with electric cars like these, you have to buy the AC charger separately. You only get the basic kit, but here the intermediate AC charger is also being offered with the car, at least as of now. The AC charger will take about 6 hours is what we are told to get a full charge on this vehicle, and it will be a wall unit that will have to be installed in your garage so that You can charge the car, you can even plan the charging on the car. You don't have to leave the charging all through the night if you want. You can plan exactly what part of the night or which 6 hours through the day or the night or any time you want to schedule the charging. So you can just leave the plug plugged in there, and you can plan exactly when you want to begin the charging, and that is when it will start charging the car. Essentially, in the global markets, people use this later in the night. They use the planned charging to start charging later in the night so that they reduce the amount of pressure that you will have on the electric grid. Now in India, I'm not sure if you would want to plan so much. The third charging option will take 19 hours. It's a basic cable, plugs into your regular 3-point plug that you get in any Indian household, and it plugs into the front of the car. Takes 19 hours for a full charge. So once you come back from work, you can leave it there, and by the time you're ready to go to work again next morning, the vehicle will be charged and ready. You might just require this slow charging also, maybe once a week, and you will be sorted for at least the weekdays. And then for your weekends, you will have to plan accordingly, because like I said, I'm looking at a 220 to 320 kilometer range. So you might not be able to do really long road trips without stopping for a complete recharge. But yes, and I'm also told that Google Maps these days has started listing electric stations, charging stations. So once they start gaining popularity, you will be able to even map them out and then plan your road trips so that you know exactly where you want to stop, for how long, maybe an hour, hour and a half, and then continue with your road trip again. These batteries are the lightweight lithium-ion polymer type, which help the Kona maintain a relatively light weight of under 1700 kilos. They feed juice to a synchronous motor, which powers the front axle and has an output that is equivalent of 136 PS. Hyundai claims a 0 to 100 sprint time of a relatively quick 9.7 seconds. And on the back straight of the BIC, our Kona test car topped out at about 160 kilometers an hour. Another interesting bit with these new age electric cars is their ability to drive in what they call a single pedal operation. Now, you had automatics killing the clutch pedal, that moved us to a 2-pedal operation, and now you have electric vehicles which have regenerative braking, recuperation, which essentially means that yes, there are still 2 pedals, but you may not ever need to use the brake pedal that often. And that is what they mean by a single pedal operation. You're only using the accelerator, and the moment you take your foot off the accelerator, there is a proper deceleration. It doesn't coast or it doesn't slow down very slowly. There is rapid deceleration. So you can choose how rapid you want it. So you have 2 paddles behind the wheel like you have on some automatic transmissions, but here it essentially lets you decide what is the level of regenerative braking that you want. So you have level 0 where the deceleration forces are much lower. So when you go off the throttle pedal, the deceleration won't be as sharp, won't be as rapid. It's almost like coasting. Move up to level 1, 2 or 3 and the deceleration is much stronger. In level 3, in fact, I've only had to use the brake pedal once at moderate speeds here on the BIC, and that was at the end of the start-finish straight. Most of the other corners, all I had to do was go off the throttle pedal in good time, and it decelerates quite quickly, it decelerates quite rapidly, and I can just enter the corner then. So that is what essentially they mean by single pedal driving. Will you be able to use it in the urban environment or on the highway? Well, given our traffic conditions, I'm not very sure, but if it's a disciplined traffic that you are looking at, if you know you are in a proper lane and you know the vehicle in front of you is going to decelerate, you can plan your deceleration accordingly. All you need to do is just go off the throttle pedal and it will start decelerating. And I've tried it in the city and it works quite well, especially coming to a halt at a traffic light or slowing down for an intersection. You can plan it very well. You don't have to touch the brake pedal. But yes, there is a brake pedal that exists, so if you need to use the conventional brakes, you can. Why I say conventional brakes is because unlike many electric vehicles which have the regenerative braking or the recuperation, where the brakes feel wooden, even on some of the luxury cars, they feel quite wooden until the physical brakes actually come into play. And that doesn't happen with this car. The brake pedal feel is very conventional, it's very normal, very easy to get used to, or maybe you don't even need to get used to it. It feels just as normal as any other Hyundai car. In fact, better than some of the other Hyundai cars. You don't need so much braking pressure thanks to all the regenerative braking that you also have. So brake pedal feel is absolutely normal. That's the bottom line. It doesn't feel very wooden, and that's a good thing. Now, my only little grudge with this recuperation or with this regenerative braking and the single pedal operation is that when you go off the throttle pedal and the car starts slowing down, There is no way for this car to tell the person driving behind you or the motorist driving behind you that the car is decelerating. It is not lighting up the brake lights, which I think it should have done, at least in level 2 and 3 of the regenerative braking. When the deceleration forces are so strong, they should have lit up the brake lights every time you go off the throttle pedal, just to warn the motorists around that the car is going to slow down and not in a conventional manner. How does the Kona electric drive overall? Well, if you were to ignore the lack of drivetrain noise, if you were to completely ignore the lack of any vibrations into the cabin, which is a good thing, this feels like any other Hyundai crossover. It feels just like a Venue or like a Creta. The steering is decent for a Hyundai. It is not too over assisted. It doesn't feel too light either. You have different drive modes as well, so moving up to the sportier driving mode does weigh up the steering quite nicely, and here at the racetrack it does feel quite good. The sport mode will also make sure that the electric motor feels a little more eager, and the deceleration forces are a little stronger in terms of the sportier drive. So when you are in level 3, the deceleration forces are a slight bit more stronger than what they are in the level 3 with an eco mode. In the city, of course, you have the eco mode to maximize the range that you can get out of the battery pack, and that is something that you're going to leave this car in often if you're going to be driving in the city. But hit the twisties and the sport mode does just fine. This car doesn't feel very different to drive than the conventional cars that we have driven so far. Like I said, the brakes feel normal, the steering feels exactly the same. It's just the lack of noise that essentially makes it spookishly quiet in here. Even the air conditioning, for that matter, is quite quiet. The Kona also feels quite easy and car-like to drive. Power delivery in all of its modes is very linear and yet instantaneous. Hyundai has also increased the ground clearance by about 10% for the Indian road conditions. But the battery in the floor gives it good high-speed stability, and yet it doesn't feel too heavy or wallowy around bends, unlike some of the older battery-powered cars. Grip from the tires is generally quite good, and the tires are pretty silent despite being the low-resistance type. In fact, the car feels quite easygoing and calm, and that makes it a likable package for the daily chaos. Now, right after the launch, a lot of you said that this is probably a very expensive car at 25.3 lakh rupees ex-showroom. I don't look at it that way. Yes, size-wise, it is not as big as the Tucson. In fact, it's a size smaller than the Creta. But in terms of its equipment, there is a lot that you get for your money, for the money that you're paying for this car. And then that's how pricey electric cars are, given the battery pack and given the complex configuration that it comes with. Of course, the government is starting to look more positively at these kind of configurations, at these kind of vehicles. There are new plans and policies that are coming up for these cars, which should also probably make the Kona a little cheaper going forward. Not to immediate effect, but maybe going forward the Kona and the likes of it could get cheaper. But if you were to put things into perspective and look at what the expected prices for some of the other upcoming electric vehicles are, for the kind of size they are at, I think Hyundai has got a very nice balance here. This is still quite a roomy crossover. It drives quite well. It feels quite premium. It doesn't feel like a cheap car. It doesn't feel like a 10 lakh rupee car for that matter. In fact, it doesn't feel like a 10 lakh rupee car that's expensive only because it's got a battery pack. It does feel quite premium. The fit and finish, all the features that it offers are really quite good. So for that price, I don't think this is really a pricey product. I think if you were to add the amount of value it brings to the table, what you need to look at is not just the pricing that they are asking when you're buying the car, but the pricing that, or the money that you will spend maintaining the car. The first service is expected at 30,000 kilometers. There are not many moving parts in this car anymore, right? Because there's no engine, so you don't need to service the car that often. 30,000 kilometer service interval is huge. And what do you need to service? Nothing. Maybe just change the coolants, run a check on the brake pads. If they are worn out, if you have been using the physical brakes that often, and if they are worn out, then probably they'll need a change. But that's about it. There's nothing much. There's just preventive maintenance. There is no maintenance as such where you have to replace things. Probably in the longer run, you might have to replace the suspension components, of course the tires as well. But that's about it. Put that in perspective to a regular vehicle, put that in perspective to other vehicles in the 20 to 30 lakh rupee bracket, and you suddenly start seeing tremendous value in what this car offers. And not just that, look at the warranty package that they have on offer, which I think will add to a big peace of mind when it comes to buying or owning an electric vehicle. 3-year standard up to 5 years on the entire car, and then a standalone 8-year warranty for the battery pack, which is big deal because this is a lithium ion battery pack. In the past, car makers have gone on record saying that lithium ion batteries may not work that well for the Indian climate, the Indian weather, and the heat levels that the Indian summers go through. But 8 years is a big deal. 8-year warranty is a big deal on lithium ion battery pack. That's complete peace of mind. And Hyundai is saying that the life of this battery pack is 13 years. That's more than the lifetime of most cars, or the amount of time that you are going to use a car. So I think in terms of peace of mind, when it comes to the ownership of an electric vehicle of this class, I think Hyundai has got all the calculations right. And like I said, I think the pricing is bang on as well. So summing this up is very easy. It starts right here.